I'm here to talk to you about the impact that smell disorders can have on health, well-being and safety following a head injury. And we'll also talk about taste as part of that conversation as well. So yeah, as was already mentioned, Duncan set the charity up in 2012 because there was nobody out there to help him after he lost his sense of smell. And he set it up with Professor Carl Philpott, who is actually a professor of rhinology and olfactology, which is a bit of a mouthful, but that is basically, you know, his specialist area is around a smell, and he looks at taste as well. We do cover 3 areas as a charity. So the education piece that I do, but we also have a support and information service, and with support from Professor Carl Philpott, we look at the research side of things as well, because that is very limited at the moment. And as part of the work that we're doing, as part of the education piece that I'm doing, we want to transform society's understanding of the importance of both smell and taste, and hopefully therefore transform the lives of those that are actually affected by smell and taste disorders. So olfactory dysfunction, which are smell disorders, is common following trauma to the head, and occurs in approximately 20% of traumatic brain injury cases. Approximately 1 in 2 patients with olfactory deficit, so that's either reduced or no sense of smell, or it could be an impaired sense of smell following head injury, are actually unaware of this sensory impairment. So while I'm here to talk to you about head injuries, there are other causes as well, and it's worth being known about those too, because they can sort of link together. COVID-19, this will be the one that everyone really talks about now. I certainly lost my sense of smell twice when I've had COVID, but viral infections, cold and flu, have always had some impact on our smell and our taste. Sinonasal disorders and allergies, head injuries, which is why I'm here talking to you today. The aging process. Like your eyesight and like your hearing, your sense of smell and taste can diminish with age, but we don't do regular testing, so it's not something that's generally talked about, and potentially up to 1 in 4 people over the age of 65 will have an impaired sense of smell or taste. Certain medications, certain operations, certain treatments, so certain cancer treatments, can also lead to smell or taste disorders. Neurodegenerative diseases, so things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, can also cause our sense of smell and taste to change. In fact, there's lots of documented evidence now that tells us that a very early warning sign for both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's can be losing the sense of smell, and that can happen many years before other changes are noticed. Exposure to toxins, people surviving stroke, their smell and taste can be affected in lots of different ways. Epilepsy, so some people that have epilepsy will talk about their sense of smell may change prior to having an epileptic episode. There are also quite a lot of causes that we don't actually know what they are that cause people to have an impaired sense of smell or taste, and that's called idiopathic. And then there are people that are actually born without a sense of smell or sense of taste, or having no memory, and that's called congenital. So if you yourself are on here and at any point have lost your sense of smell or taste, or have lost your sense of smell or taste, then you'll realise just how important these senses are to us. But it isn't something we generally think about or talk about, but the impact it can have on our lives, when you look at these, just look at these pictures here, you know, just going for a walk in that field, when you can't smell or your smell's impaired, you don't get the smells from walking through that field. So it's almost like you're in a bubble, because you can't smell the environment around you, or the smell that you do get isn't very pleasant. Not being able to smell food cooking, but then there's the dangers, the sign, you know, not being able to smell smoke from a fire, not being able to smell if there's a gas leak, but also we subconsciously bond with family and friends and people around us through our sense of smell as well. So it really is a neglected sense, because it isn't one that we talk about, and there isn't any training in particular around this in the NHS, unless it's a very specialist subject. So just to give a bit of information around smell and taste disorders. So smell disorders or olfactory dysfunction. So anosmia is your complete inability to smell, and hypoosmia is your reduced ability to smell. Now, the next three have been talked about in more detail since COVID, but they've always been around as well. So parosmia, this is where people have distorted smells. This is where people talk about the fact they can smell, but actually what they smell is really unpleasant. So, for example, we have members where if food comes out of a buffet, it actually smells like sewage to them. So it's really unpleasant. So rather than not being able to smell, the smells are so unpleasant they can make you feel ill. You've also got things like beauty products smelling like burnt rubber. Then phantom smells, phantosmia. So this is where people saying, I can smell something, but nobody else can. So, for example, I know somebody that was living with long COVID, and they had a permanent smell of burnt toast in their nose. Not particularly unpleasant smell, but you can imagine how irritating that would be to have a permanent smell in your nose. And then hypersensitivity to smell, so hyperosmia. So this is where things still smell the same, but they smell much stronger. So things like garlic, onion, red meat, coffee is quite a common one. This can also affect people that are neurodiverse, so people with ADHD and autism have high sensitivity to smells. Again, to the point, a bit like with parosmia, where the smell can be so strong, it can make people feel really ill. We know of people that say they can't walk past coffee shops in the high street anymore because the smell of the coffee is just too strong that it makes them feel ill. And then you have taste disorders. So you can have a smell disorder and still taste, and you can have a taste disorder and still smell. So our taste disorder, so this is your taste buds and your tongue. So you can have complete inability to taste, you can have distorted taste, so you can have degutia and agusia, but you can have phantom taste, you can have high sensitivity, and you have reduced ability to taste as well. So a bit more around smell, taste, and flavour. So you may or may not be aware, but olfactory bulb, which is roughly where that star is how we smell. It sits at the front of our brain. So when food is cooking, or you're out in the garden, you smell through your nose up into your olfactory bulb. We taste, so our 5 basic tastes are on our taste buds on our tongue. So sweet, salt, sour, bitter, and savoury. Now, when we eat our food or we take a drink, what we actually do while we're eating it or while we're drinking it is while we're chewing that food, we will actually be smelling it, and we're smelling it through the back of our throat. And that again goes back up to the olfactory bulb and then the parts of the brain that will then decipher those messages. So when we eat or drink, that process of smelling the food through the back of the throat is where we get the flavour for our food. It's actually called olfactory. I've just forgotten the word now. I won't be giving you a biological word. Retronasal olfaction. Sorry, I completely forgot that. So retronasal olfaction, but basically we smell our food and that's where we get our flavours. So if somebody smell has gone completely, they can't smell any food, but they also won't get any flavour from their food. If their taste buds are working, then they will get sweetness of the food, they will get the salt of the food. So think about a cup of coffee. You drink that cup of coffee. So before you drink it, you get the smell of the coffee. You drink the coffee and you would get the flavour of the coffee. If you can't smell, you'd get no flavour of the coffee, but you might get the bitterness of the coffee bean on the tongue. So what we say is we taste our tastes, but we smell our flavour. And I'll talk a bit more in a moment about how that might present itself in somebody that has an impaired sense of smell. So talking about smell in particular, if your smell is impaired, so it's either distorted or reduced or you can't smell at all, you may not be able to smell a gas leak. So there are risks attached there. People may stop doing things that they enjoy because they involve smell, so they don't get the same enjoyment from it. So going for walks, gardening, hobbies like cooking, even some aromatherapy, because they don't get the same pleasure that they used to get from it. If somebody has cognitive impairment and they turn the gas on for cooking but forget to light it, then they may not be able to smell that there's gas coming out. Or it might not smell like gas, so they wouldn't notice that there's gas coming out. While cleaning, so when I had COVID, I couldn't smell bleach, which I found really weird. Now, obviously, I couldn't smell full stop, so I shouldn't be able to smell anything, but the thought of not being able to smell something as strong as bleach was really strange. So when people are cleaning, if their smell's impaired, they may not be aware of how strong the fumes are from the cleaning products. You might see changes to people's personal hygiene. So people might become really anxious about, do I smell because I can't smell myself, and get really anxious about that. Or people, you know, might smell differently because they're not aware of what they smell of anymore. Difficult to tell if food's gone off if your smell's impaired. So you have to use the dates on food to ensure that food is safe. Now, that's not a fail-safe approach, because I can think of many times I've opened, say, a packet of chicken, the date's been fine, but when I've opened it, I can smell that it's going off. When you look at chicken, or you look at milk, or maybe look at fish, you can't visually tell if it's gone off. You can only generally tell it's going off because of the smell. By the time you get to things like mold, it's way past, you know, being able to eat. So some people can get food poisoning because they don't realise the food's gone off. Now, coming back to flavour and taste. So if somebody smells impaired, that can mean they get no flavour from their food. So what might happen is they may be drawn to things that they can taste in their taste buds if their taste buds are working, which means they might suddenly eat really salty crisps or really salty foods, or be drawn, suddenly have a sweet tooth that they never had before, or be drawn to processed foods because of the additives and all the, you know, salt content in there, because they can taste that, but they're not getting the flavours anymore. Some people stop eating altogether because they just lose the pleasure in food, full stop. And also, if their taste buds aren't working as well, and they get no taste, no flavour, there is no enjoyment to food, it can really affect how people engage with their food. Can't smell if something's burning. And smells trigger memories. And imagine if you can't smell, or your smell's impaired, those memories that potentially aren't going to get triggered. So our sense of smell is the most closely linked sense to the part of the brain that triggers our memories. So when you think about all those things I've just covered off there, and there'll be lots of other things that people can talk about, that how it affects them. It comes down to nutrition, if people aren't eating properly. Some people isolate themselves because they don't want to go out and engage, you know, with a group of friends over a meal, or through drinking, going out for drinks, because of they don't want to tell people that they can't get the same pleasure, or they can't eat certain foods. Physical health's affected if they stop doing things that are good for their sort of their health and their physical well-being, going out for walks, if they don't enjoy the environment. But also, if your nutritional value in your food is not good, that affects your physical health. And then relationships. So a lot of people talk about frustration with family members when they don't understand what it's like to not be able to smell. And all of that comes back to people's well-being. So thinking about how to stay safe, warm and independent, and what you can do. So anybody that has an impaired sense of smell is classed as vulnerable, which means you can be registered on the Priority Services Register. This is a register for the whole of the UK, and it means that if you have a gas leak, or you have a problem with utilities or your services, and you're classed as more vulnerable because of your smell disorder, then you get priority service over everybody else, and it offers other support as well. If you have somebody has cognitive impairment and they have a habit of turning the cooker on but not lighting it, then a locking cooker valve can be fitted free of charge by any of the gas distribution networks, and that again can help keep people safe. So we talk about smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Most people know about these. Carbon monoxide has no smell. Smoke does, so it's really important. But natural gas detectors, which aren't as readily available, but you can find them online, they're relatively cheap. But if your smell's impaired, getting a natural gas detector is really important. So if you have a gas leak, or there is, you know, somebody's turned the cooker on and not lit it, you know that there is gas leak, and you know how to keep yourself safe. And some gas appliances do actually have a cut-off if the flame were to go out. But if they don't, that's where the locking cooker valve can come in. And for those of you or anybody that's affected by smell-based disorders, but generally this is for anybody that has appliances within the Cadent gas distribution network, so that covers a big chunk of the UK. You get your gas appliances serviced for free. There's certain criteria to meet, but it's not very strict criteria. And that can mean that you can keep your gas appliances in good working order, safe from checking there's no leaks, that the pipe work is still okay. So that's good as well. I'm just going to turn my camera off because it's just said internet's unstable. And then food safety and domestic hygiene. So if you've got a smell disorder, but you live with somebody that doesn't have one, ask them designated nose. Can you have a sniff of this to see whether it's okay to eat? Sticking to best before end dates. Last year, both Morrison's and Marks and Spencer's, to name a few, we're going to take the date off milk, saying that's okay, you can do the sniff test. You can't do the sniff test if it smells impaired. So Duncan did actually write to different organisations, and that's something that did get sort of changed. Labelling food with the date that you've opened it. Now, things like bacon have a really long date on them as to when you can use them, but once they're opened, they do say you should use them with a certain number of days. Now, I can smell, so if I go in the fridge, look at my bacon and think, I don't know how long it's been opened, because I generally can't remember, I can have a sniff and I can tell. But if your smell's impaired, labelling your food with the date you opened it is a good way of knowing how long it's been open for. And then visual signs such as discoloration and mold. But as we've already talked about, chicken and milk, it's more about the smell, so you wouldn't necessarily have those. If you're cleaning and you've got a smell disorder, keeping the rooms well ventilated, don't mix your products, read safety labels, wear protective clothing. All of that sounds like you think that's just common sense, but you don't think about it unless you're somebody living with a smell disorder. And then let's talk food. There are lots of recipes on our website around how you can engage with food in a different way if your smell or taste is affected. So we talk about concentrating on foods with strong defined textures, so you can engage with food in a different way, different colours, so that people living with olfactory disorders can actually get more enjoyment from their food. Duncan is a real foodie. He loves his food. His smell never came back after he had his head injury, but he still really enjoys food. He just goes for textures and tastes. So he thinks about, things that are quite salty, or adding things like chili flakes to things, or putting colour into salads, adding things to things like mashed potato that add texture. So it's just a different experience. And focusing on things like smoked garlic, chipotle chili flakes, and those sort of things that come in with the taste. Now, somebody's living with parosmia, which is where smell is distorted or taste is distorted, then it's harder. So you have to think about keeping a list of things that you might find unpleasant, sharing those lists with family and friends so they can avoid these when you're around them. But also you can break down your food to find out which part of it is unpleasant. So we had an example of somebody that loves scrambled egg, after COVID, had parosmia, couldn't eat scrambled egg. She broke it down. She cooked the egg separately, the white and the yolk, and found out it was the white was unpleasant, but the yolk wasn't, so she could still eat it. So there's lots of things you can look at. And as I say, there's a lot more information on our website with regards to that. And then other ideas. So Thomas Hummel has done research into smell training following a virus or a brain injury, and there is some evidence to support that this can help with rehabilitative smell recovery and training. And again, there's information on our website. But also, if your smell is affected or your taste, is going to your GP and asking for a referral to an ENT specialist. And there's also something on our website around how you can talk to your GP to get them to understand you do need a referral, because a lot of the time GPs have had no training on this and therefore they're not aware of the importance of it. And we do have some specialist smell and taste clinics as well. And then just to make you aware, on Monday the 30th of September, we're actually having one of our quarterly patients and professional online sessions, and the one on the 30th of September is about smell and taste changes following brain injury for both patients and professionals. So if anybody's interested in that, there'll be a link on our website, there'll be a link on our social media as well, but that might be something that somebody's interested in too. We have a medical professional coming along to talk about what the changes are, and we also have a lived experience expert as well. So just so you know, we've got that coming up, which is quite timely. So what else do we offer? As a charity, we're free. You can become a member, whether you are supporting somebody, whether you're affected or whether you're a professional. We have online monthly peer support groups for different groups of people. So people that have lost their sense of smell, people that have been born without sense of smell, people that have distorted smell, and we're also starting to look at the taste side of things as well. We run quarterly medical sessions obviously I've just mentioned that one that's coming up in September. We have our information sheets. We have our information service as well, which is run by my colleague Mags. So we don't have a telephone service because we're too small, but we do have an inbound inbox that Mags is there to support people and signpost. We have, as I say, a document about how you can talk to your doctor, lots of information on our YouTube channels as well. So, you know, if you're interested, sign up and you'll get updates on research and everything else that we're doing as a charity too. So thank you for listening to me. Hopefully that managed to happen without me breaking up too much. There's the info in Fifth Sense email for Mags. There's our website. And if you think anybody else might be interested in what I've talked about today, then share my information, because that's what I do, and it's to raise awareness as much as possible. Thank you.